Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Fundamentals. I'm Adam, joined alongside with April, and today we are going to talk about red flags for nonprofit financials. So, you're a new board member, you're coming onto the board, you're all excited, and there's a conversation about the finances or your first meetings about the audit. So, what are some things that you should be looking at or be mindful of when you're talking about red flags for financials?
Yeah. So let's start with some of the top-sided financials. Most nonprofits are required to file a 990, file a tax return, unless you are organized as a church. You are required to have a financial statement. Most times it's an audit. So if you are new to a board and you are looking at your finances, one of the good questions to ask is, are we filing our 990 on time? Are we filing our audit on time? And what does on time mean? So if you are funded through government grants, a lot of times your deadline for filing that audit is different than filing the audit with your state charitable registration. So you want to understand as a board member or a member of management what those deadlines are for your financial statements and 990s, and you want to make sure that you're getting them in on time. You don't want to be recurring in terms of lateness or asking for extensions year over year. So something to keep in mind when it comes to your finances is, are you filing those things on time to make sure you're in compliance?
Yeah, and if you're looking at it and it seems very untimely, your filings, that could be an issue of processes within the organization. There's something going on behind the scenes that's causing delays. Now, it's not always the organization's fault. It could be the outside auditor's fault. But it's a question you should be having, because there really shouldn't be a reason for returns or statements be filed late or close to the deadline. And it's just a question of what exactly is going on. So another one is regarding the budget. So every organization should have a budget for the upcoming year. So if there's no budget, immediate red flag right there alone. Now the next part with that is, how accurate is that budget? Now when the budget process starts, it's essentially your best guess for the upcoming year and what grants you expect to come in, what the costs are going to be for those grants, things of that nature. But your best set plans don't always work out, so things change. And is the organization monitoring the budget, reviewing the budget, and making those changes as it's occurring? Are they looking at the budget at every board meeting? Budget versus actual. Where are we trending? Are we in line with budget? Are we going to exceed the budget? What exactly is going on? If those conversations aren't happening, that should be a red flag.
Absolutely. So one, you want to make sure you have a budget. Two, make sure it's as accurate as it can be and that you're reviewing it regularly. Try not to have a balanced budget. We talked about this a little bit in our other video about budgeting. We went through it in a little more detail. But you don't want to just have revenue and expenses and at the bottom they come to zero. You want to make it as realistic as possible so you know the finances and where the organization's headed for the year.
Actually, if you're a board member, that should also probably be a red flag if you have a perfectly zero budget at the end, because very likely that means there could be a plug somewhere to zero that out. So other area is turnover. Now this is more operational, but if you're talking with other board members and they can't keep staff, it's constantly turning over, that could be a question of what is the culture like within the organization, what exactly is occurring. Now we know in nonprofits, burnout's high, so that could definitely be it. Funds are tight, you can't fully get the number of people you need, so that could be a part of it. But what exactly is going on if there is high turnover? You just want to get an understanding of that.
And it could lead to things like those late financial statements and audits and late 990s.
So that's more your top-sided red flags. So now your true financial red flags. And with these, it's important to look at several years, not just current year, prior year. Current year, prior year doesn't tell the full story most of the time. You want to see a trend. You want to go back 3, 4, or 5 years to really see what is going on and which direction things are trending. So April, which one do you want to start with?
So I would say the first one is recurring losses. Now, there could be some reasons for a recurring loss, like if you have a really high depreciation expense. That is an expense for GAAP and accrual, but I understand that it's not a cash outflow every year. But you want to know if you're having recurring losses and what kind of losses they really are. Make sure you have a good understanding of what it is. There could be a reason, but most times it's a red flag.
Associated with that is looking at your net assets. If you have a deficit for your net assets, that's a red flag. That means historically you've had significant losses where you no longer have positive net, equity or net assets in the organization. Also with that, you want to look at the composition of the assets. Is it without donor restrictions or is it with donor restrictions? When you have a high number of with donor restrictions, and remember from previous videos, that means the donor is designating funds for specific programs or to be used at a certain time frame, then that means there's future outflows that need to occur, future expenses. If that number is extremely high, that means that's important for the organization to really monitor cash flow, because now they're required to make these payments in future years and they need to make sure that the funds to do that.
It also means when your donor restricted net assets are increasing that you can't use it for general purposes. You can only use it for its intended purpose. So that may mean you can't make payroll. You can't use those funds to make payroll. You really can't dip into that donor money.
So another area is debt. Now, if you're a housing organization, you have housing or property on the books, you probably have high debt because it could very likely be mortgage. That's a different topic. But if you're just a true social service organization, something along those lines, high amount of debt could be a red flag, because what exactly was that debt used for? And that probably means if it's really high, there could be cash flow issues, that they were using the debt to plug in gaps in funding potentially. And now the question is, all right, how are we going to repay this?
Yeah, they could be loans. Like you said, they could be mortgages. They could be advances on lines of credit for operational reasons.
Associated with that is your current liabilities and your current assets. You want what's called the current ratio. Is looking at liquidity. So do you have a positive current ratio? Do you have more current assets, or at least do your current assets equal your current liabilities? If the answer is no, and you look back several years and the trend's been getting worse and worse and worse, there's something going on that needs to be fixed.
And even within that current asset number, there are different account balances, like cash, receivables. Your receivables could be increasing year over year, and maybe your AR is aging, so it may look like you have a high current asset number. But if your cash is going down or your investments have been depleted, those are a red flag. So you want to understand that composition within the current assets as well, to see what's going on with your cash flow and how liquidity can impact your operations.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want to make sure your current assets are healthy.
Right.
That the AR is under control and cash and investments are remaining consistent or increasing, hopefully. But yeah, the other thing also, your reserves, as April kind of alluded to, is, cash and investments, you want hopefully have at least 3 months of reserves on hand. More is definitely better, but minimum, you're shooting for 3 months. A lot of organizations do struggle with this. I think the vast majority probably have maybe 1 month reserves on hand. So this is a challenge, but this is definitely a goal if your organization isn't there to get to that 3 month target.
Yep. So hopefully this video gave you some insights into some financial red flags for nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.